When you think about prostitution, the last thing that comes to mind is the church or people who worship God or believe in God or trust in God. When you think of prostitution, you can't just relate these images with holiness and worship and things like that. But you're going to find out otherwise. And then also, I've been thinking hard and long about what is the lasting solution to prostitution. And in here, you're going to see images mostly of women, but I know prostitution is not just about women. We've often defined prostitution as a woman issue, but it's not. Although, of course, in here you mostly see women because this mostly, I think 95% of this affects women. And then also prostitution, the definition of prostitution differs from place to place. There's also a spiritual definition of prostitution, which I hope we can have time to lay out in this podcast. I beg your pardon, in this video. Your faithful friend, once again, Marvin. This is a very interesting discussion that I thought we should have, and I need help from all of you as you watch. Send in the comments and let's help me understand this issue. Now, I've been thinking hard and long about, wouldn't polygamy help to curb prostitution? Because at the rate that prostitution is going all around the world, you can travel across the globe, north to east, south to west, it's everywhere. It's even in corporate packaging, in corporate imagery. A lot of corporations now use images, I want to say prostitution, but really of women flaunting their flesh and all of that. It's part of corporate branding now. Prostitution has become so complex, and it has taken on so many forms in places like the West, America, countries like America, Canada. It comes in so many packages. There's what you call escort services and different kinds of packaging that make it look like it's not prostitution, but it's really one thing. It's prostitution. And really, my coming out here is out of concern. As much as I'm concerned about the people involved in prostitution and also the consumer of prostitution, both ends, as much as I express this concern, I also want to take this opportunity to just kind of tell off the church. I guess maybe tell off is not the right word, but to blast the church. Maybe blast is not a good word either, but to really put a spotlight on the church, the clergy, the preachers of the gospel. And lately you've heard me talk a lot about preachers of the gospel, pastors, evangelists, teachers, and apostles and prophets. I really want to think, and I could be wrong, you guys can correct me, can help me get it right here. But I really think that part of the reason why this prostitution is growing at an alarming rate is because, again, preachers aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. I believe, for me, prostitution is an injustice to humanity. Yes, you might argue that these women make the choice to go on the streets or to start selling their flesh. But think about the fact that a lot of these women, and even men, of course, sell their bodies because they're trying to meet a financial need somewhere. I personally, over the years, have spoken to a number of prostitutes and asking why they're on the streets, why they're doing what they're doing. A number of them will tell you, are you going to feed my kids? So there's a whole host of situations and reasons that force people to get into prostitution. And I do really feel for these prostitutes. Many, many years ago, when I was much, much, much younger, I pointed a finger at them. I condemned them. I didn't condemn them directly in terms of lambasting them and dehumanizing them and things like that. But just in my heart and in my head, I used to think, oh my God, how pitiful. How can you do that? I used to think like that. I was judgmental towards them. But having grown much older and seen how difficult life is and how it has been difficult even for I myself, trying to make it to the end of the month and things like that, you really come to understand why these women are down to this level. But also, You think about the emotional starvation, if I can call it that, how so many people are emotionally starved. They don't have the privilege of being in a relationship, particularly a love relationship or boy-girl relationship or marriage relationship, where their emotional needs can be met and even their sexual needs can be met. And so you find that because of this imbalance or lack, a lot of people now end up having to go into some form of prostitution. And it may not really be prostitution. You might want to call it whoring or hooking or whatever it is, but eventually it leads to that where a woman now even starts making money from it. And remember, like I said, prostitution takes so many different forms. There are women who go out there, like go to a nightclub and then they hook up with men, and they're giving their bodies on condition that the man can help them financially, either pay rent or just some form of financial favor, which they themselves may not look at as prostitution. But at the end of the day, it is prostitution. But I also mentioned that one of the definitions of prostitution is spiritual. I myself, as a spiritual person, a religious person, I believe that prostitution is when a person gives them, particularly a woman, gives herself sexually to another man who is not her husband. That in itself is prostitution. However, let's move on, because those are things we can debate the whole day. But the major issue is here. We're trying to find a solution to this prostitution that is like, it's booming everywhere. And so I'm thinking, can't polygamy help? Now, religious people, not all religious people, but particularly Christianity, they've condemned polygamy. They say polygamy is a sin. Now, some of you know by now that I've made a public announcement that I have since left the church. I don't consider myself a religious person. I believe in God. I love God. I respect God. But I found out that the church is failing people in so many different ways. And this is one of them. That they're failing to hold governments to account for how they spend money and can't create jobs. And now you have so many of these women, and it includes men in some cases, going into the streets to try and earn a living. And even in cases where jobs are provided or created, they don't pay enough for people to pay their bills. That a lot of women now need to do prostitution on the side, or need some kind of boyfriend, where they get into situations such as friends with benefits, which for me is prostitution. We can camouflage it all we want, give it all these nice terminologies, but it's really prostitution. And I'd like to hear you guys as you watch this. I'd like to hear your views on what you think on the right way to define these things. Because this really for me is education. And it's education for all of us. But this has become such a big problem. Another form of prostitution that has emerged, or let me say another form of injustice that uses prostitution, is that so many business people have opened up businesses where they use women behind the scenes as a bait. For example, people that run bars and nightclubs, on the side they run brothels and prostitution rackets. And a lot of them, they literally hold these women hostage. They hold them hostage. They take them in. I mean, we've heard reports in countries like America of how they find that Mexican women are taken from Mexico, brought to America, being promised a good life, and they find themselves in a brothel, and they have to bring in a certain amount of money by selling their bodies. And even when they make that money doesn't belong to them, and these men are using them to sell their bodies and make money for them. And these women really just end up with nothing. And some of these women have survived. They've run away from these arrangements and survived and been a source of information for intelligence. But the whole idea of me doing this video was to bring about this discussion. Do you not think that encouraging polygamy would help? And again, I was talking about how religious people, particularly Christianity, because I know Muslims or Islam, if I'm correct, they don't condemn. Actually, they don't. They don't. That I know for sure. They don't, because their belief is that if you can look after the women, you can have as many as you want. So now I'm thinking, The fact that some religious sects, such as Christianity, condemn polygamy, shouldn't we just apply common sense to this issue? And also, even as I discuss with friends, we've been asking ourselves, why is it that there's so many more women than men? Why is there this imbalance on earth? Does God make this mistake, or is it deliberate? But even then, even if we found out what the reason is why there's always more women than men, just common sense, I feel that promoting or encouraging polygamy would bring down the levels of prostitution and help humanity move towards finding a solution. And it's interesting that a lot of women who engage in prostitution or some form of sleeping around, or you might want to call it different names, hooking up or being a hooker or whatever, it's interesting that a lot of these women will get into some sexual relation with a married man, but will leave a man who cheats on them. Now, I understand that it's painful, and I'm not saying women should not leave, but I don't understand how women can leave a man because he slept with someone else, but then go and share a man with other women. You understand what I'm saying? So I need to understand that as well. I'm looking into it and thinking, okay, what really would push a woman to make this choice? You know what I'm saying? And I do understand that to a certain extent, a woman who leaves a man who has cheated is simply trying to protect herself from being taken advantage of. That's very understandable. And I do encourage that a woman whose man has cheated on her should leave. I have nothing against it. But what I don't understand is why then women would be ready to share a man who is sleeping with multiple women. That doesn't make sense. And so if women are willing to share men that are having sex with multiple women, why not just get into some polygamous arrangement? Why not be married in polygamy? Why wouldn't that be a good thing for humanity? I really believe that it would bring some form of moral control or moral restraint. I really think so. You guys let me know what you think, because I'm really just trying to draw ideas here to be able to understand this. Because personally, when I see these images everywhere, just where prostitution everywhere, all streets, go to Peru, go to Colombia, Brazil, Mexico, South Africa, Kenya, Nairobi, Nigeria, Asia, Bangkok, Thailand, Japan, China, everywhere. This thing, it's all over the streets. All over the streets. What is the way forward? Do we just let it run riot? Do we just let this thing just run and just be on the loose? Because it seems that that's what's happening. Now, for the church, in as much as the church is silent on issues to do with justice, and I've been talking about these things for quite some time now. I've been making videos talking about how I feel that the pastors or the clergy are letting us down. That I'll say this without doubt and without any shame. I believe that the world's biggest problem is politicians and preachers. And I've done, I think, about 2 videos where I've explained my reasoning behind this claim, and I'll continue to do more. And even when it comes to prostitution, part of the problem, if not the entire source of this problem, is the politicians and preachers. And again, I don't have time to explain here. But for politicians, for their part, they don't do what they're expected to do in those offices of leadership or governance. Things such as creating jobs. I've stated before in some of the videos I've done that there are resources on this earth enough for every single person to have a decent living. But politicians want all of that money in their pocket, or at least they want all of those resources and all of that money under their control. That's part of the problem. And then you talk about the preachers and the clergy, pastors, apostles, prophets. They don't confront and hold these political leaders to account. They don't hold them accountable. They see this problem. Preachers condemn the prostitutes, condemn these women that are making money selling their bodies, telling them that they're going to go to hell. But they don't tell the politicians that for holding the people hostage, for keeping the people out of their destiny, by taking all the resources and keeping the resources to yourselves, you are going to hell. They don't tell them that. They don't tell them that. And so what we see is that the resources that God has provided and put in the belly of the earth to be able to sustain any population that is on the earth, the politicians get control of that and deny masses of people access to it. And then, after having those resources to themselves, don't create jobs. Don't ensure that there's equity, that there's equal distribution of wealth. And then you get poverty from there. And then now you have people running to the streets, engaging themselves in prostitution. But again, like I said, the same people, politicians, that invest in these corporations, open up restaurants and big businesses, now come and employ these girls in those corporations and make them sexual pawns to attract clients to those corporations, to attract clients to those businesses, to attract clients to those restaurants that are owned by these greedy politicians who work with business people, the people that are in the corporate world, who are a part of the political system. This is the injustice that we continue to see all around the globe. And the church is silent about that. But we can clearly see what is going on. The church leaders, the apostles and preachers and prophets, they instead want to make a name, want to show that they are holy by condemning the people that are victims to these systems. These prostitutes, a lot of them that we see, and I've said before, some of them simply do it for fun. Some of them do it out of stupidity. But a large majority of these prostitutes are on the streets because they are victims of these politicians who control financial systems, economic systems, and every other system that we are governed by. And the preachers, I don't know if it's ignorance that they don't know. Well, I guess it's one or the other. Either they are very ignorant and don't know, or they simply do not care. They ignore the real problem. They ignore the root cause of all of these problems and instead go on the pulpit and condemn the prostitutes, telling them they are going to go to hell, that they should come and get saved and come to the church. And then guess what? When these people come to the church, there's no solution. Because those same pastors don't create employment for these girls who are out there trying to feed their children. Some of them have been abandoned. You talk about, there are cases in Africa where so many women have been abandoned by soldiers of different countries who came in as peacekeepers. We've seen stories of Chinese abandoning kids in Kenya, Uganda, you name it. Same thing with American soldiers. Same thing with Canadian soldiers. These things happen everywhere. They're so common. And so you find that these young ladies, and in many cases they're girls, they can even be as young as 18. Sometimes they're even underage, below the age where it's legal for them to have sex. They end up wandering in the streets or wandering in some kind of way that they can find money using their bodies, using their beauty, one and the same thing. So it's not only comical that you find preachers of the gospel are out there condemning people that are trying to find solutions. The preachers don't have a lasting solution. The politicians don't have a lasting solution. Not even a solution at all. Even if it's not long lasting, they don't have ideas of a solution at all. The only thing that they do is shoot down these people. What is even more comical is that now you're beginning to see signs of prostitution in the church itself, as you see in some of the images that are upcoming. You find that there are signs of prostitution in the church itself. And let's not forget, it's well documented, a lot of the preachers of the gospel are now caught up in sexual scandals like never before. Recently in America, we heard a report of how 38 bishops were involved in the activities of P. Diddy, Sean Combs. And you would even think that the reason that this image of prostitution is coming into the church is maybe a way of God saying, you guys need to deal with this because this is a problem that you have created. It's almost as if God himself is bringing the prostitutes into the church because it's beginning to affect almost everyone, even pastors' wives. In some cases, as some critics have said, are beginning to look like, or at least dress like, prostitutes. And this could be the result of judging these people instead of being the solution that God has called us to be. And in this video, why I'm proposing polygamy is that I'm learning personally from my own reading and researching. Polygamy is not a sin. Preachers have gone out to say polygamy is a sin. It is not a sin. Think about why is it that in the Old Testament, polygamy is not a sin. All of a sudden in the New Testament, it's a sin. Now we know the Bible is a controversial book. It's a book that brings God to us, that teaches us about God, brings us close to God, points us to God. But the Bible in itself is a controversial book. First of all, we know that colonizers brought this book to Africa to control Africa using the word of God or using the authority of God. We also know that they put this Bible together, removed some of the books that bring complete understanding to who God is, removed some of those books. Those things are well documented. And now, many of us are beginning to suspect that the reason they changed the New Testament and said that polygamy is a sin is because they wanted to bring down the population of the African people or the black people. It looks like that's what the strategy was. And even if it's true that polygamy is sin, but when you really think of it, what is worse? The levels of prostitution that we are seeing now or polygamy? Surely polygamy has to be a better thing than the prostitution that we are seeing now that is filtering even into the church. If it didn't filter way back, maybe most of us are only seeing it now, but maybe prostitution has always been there in the church. And I also want us to have one thing in mind. Every problem that is on earth is our collective fault. Boils down to all of us. Every single one of us is a contribution to everything that is around us. As I talk about many of the issues that we're struggling with in life, I always say that all of us are a part of the problem. Therefore, all of us have to be a part of a solution, which is why even in this video, I'm asking for your meaningful contributions, you guys. As you listen, you're sending contributions. I think maybe this is what needs to be done, or this, you should have said it this way, or this is actually that way. Because all of us have to be a part of the solution, because all of us are a part of the problem that we are seeing of prostitution. And prostitution is not the only problem. There's so many other issues that we have to deal with. But all of us are a contribution to the problems that we are seeing with regards to prostitution, which is what this is about today. Speaking of how or why prostitution is on the rise, it's increasing at an alarming rate. You have to understand there's some places, I know some places in Africa where parents are literally becoming the pimps to their daughters because they're sending them out. We don't have money, we don't have food. You need to do something. And basically they're telling them, not directly, but indirectly they're telling them to go and do something to get money. And what is it that they can do? What else can they do? So the message is obvious. They may not tell them, go and sleep around, go and have sex to make money. But they're telling them, you need to be able to bring money here. They're not telling them directly that you have to get a job. They're telling them that they have to bring money. But then how do you bring money as a young lady at the age of 18, the age of 20, and things like that? So parents in some places are literally becoming the pimps to their daughters and to their children. Some of these very young ladies have been abused. That's why they're on the streets. They've lost their self-esteem. They've lost a sense of self-value. They're on the streets just doing anything they can do to just get around. They don't care what happens to them. So really they need help. They need help. Some of them have been abused by their own relatives, their own fathers, and that's why they've ended up on the streets. Overall, what we are seeing is that sex, the image of a woman as a sexual being, as someone that's good for nothing but sex, is in everything. And I've said it before that it's in It's in corporate imaging or corporate image. It's in fashion designing. It's in traditional ceremonies. It's in carnivals. It's in beauty contests. It's in strip clubs, which is the more obvious. It's in soap operas. It's in pornography. It's in movies, in music videos. It's even in advertising. It's even in advertising. Everywhere you look, a woman is being portrayed as a sexual object. Everywhere you turn, a woman is being portrayed as an object of sex. And it looks like that is only exaggerating the situation. It's making everything worse. It's almost as if we are prophesying these things into being by portraying women as such. Now, I do understand that some of these traditional ceremonies, they have traditional value or historical value, but most of them cross the line. Most of them cross the line and end up portraying women as good for nothing but sex. So you see now, as part of this worsening of the situation, is that women now, it looks like, are competing to flaunt their flesh. Everywhere you look, it's like women are in competition with each other to flaunt their flesh, whether they are prostitutes or not. Even when they're in relationships, you sit back and you wonder, why would a woman in a relationship or a married woman want to show her flesh to the whole world? Why would you want to do that? But it's all part of this psychology of competition that women are naturally into. It starts off as peer pressure, and as they grow older, it becomes competition. It becomes competition, competing for fashion fads and things like that. But there's also another contribution to this puzzle that we're dealing with here. The ratio of men to women. I mean, from Bible content, we know that the Bible said that at some point we'll get to a place in life where the ratio of men to women would be 1-7. I believe now we could be at 1-30, because I know about 10 years ago, people started saying like, oh my God, I think the ratio of men to women has gone to 1-20 now. And this is about 10 years ago, maybe even more. So I'm making it, we probably are at 1-30 now. There's so many women, and you start to ask yourself questions. Has God made a mistake by bringing more women on earth than men? Is it a mistake? Or does it support the concept of polygamy? It's just a question I'm thinking. You guys think with me. Write in your contributions. Let me know what you think. Is God making a mistake, or has God made a mistake to bring on the earth more women than men? Or is it just happening? Is this thing happening by accident, or is it planned to be that way? And if it's planned to be that way, why is that? That's something we have to figure out together, you guys. We have to figure out this as a way of approaching a good solution to the problem of prostitution. And there's also a question that when women are flaunting their flesh like this, are they doing it deliberately? Are they doing it to bait men? Well, the answer could be no. To be honest, the answer could be no. But you see, again, you begin to think, a woman at the age of about 18 and over should know that when they're flaunting their flesh that way, they are inviting, I shouldn't say problems, they are inviting men. They should know. It may not always be the case, but that's the effect that it almost always has. A lot of the women that you see here are from the church, are church girls. They consider polygamy as a sin or something wrong, but do not consider the indecent exposure that they're involved in as a sin, which is a little bit strange, isn't it? They pray for God's favor in the business that they do or in the exposure that they're engaged in. A lot to say, but I hope this breaks the ice for future conversations concerning this subject. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.